I think my work has been interesting because in the cosmetics field, I was working with our office in New York, an office in London, and an office in Sydney. And so, you know, my boss would give me a document in French that I then needed to translate, and I called it literal English, which was not a good, nobody should have ever had it. But then I worked really closely with New York, London, and Sydney to adapt that English to their culture. And my boss would get worried because she'd read it, and she was French. Her English was okay, but she didn't have the cultural sensitivity. And so Sydney was coming up with something very different because legally they could not say everything that was everything that was in the French document. London was probably the closest to the French, and then the US had a completely other vibe going on. And I was always trying to, you know, advocate for each country, each culture, because at the end of the day, it wasn't the French message that needed to pass, but how each culture was going to receive that, and then ultimately lead to more sales. So my boss finally just learned to trust me, and then trust, obviously, the people in the countries. So translation can have a huge need for that cultural sensitivity, but typically you can rely on, hopefully, people in those countries. Because if someone said, you need to do this for the US, the UK, and Australia all by yourself, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. I could probably do it for the US. But that's where I think that cultural piece, especially in marketing and advertising, can be very important.
We made that experience together,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where we had a marketing manager in Paris who tried to correct our English.
Yeah.
And it was very amusing because it was copy for a very high-end cosmetics and fashion company in Paris, and they just needed to put their mark on the translation, which was not necessarily what we needed here in the US to sell the product. Because ultimately it was for the US market, and you know, you have to say certain things to people so they're going to buy your product. And if you don't, it's not going to happen. But it was very difficult to communicate that to them. And there was either an ego problem. This is something that is going to happen to you. So I'm just warning you. It's either an ego problem or a problem of career. You know, like somebody has to prove themselves in their marketing department to their boss, so they're like kind of pushing back. You can't be intimidated by that, and you can't say, oh well, yeah, because it's the marketing manager, I'll let it go. If you're a good translator, you have standards, and you're going to have to push back and say, well, this is not how we say it in the United States, and I have verified that. And it's always good to verify that with colleagues and proofreaders and editors. It's always a very good idea. We have verified that in the team, and these are our suggestions. This is what would fly in the United States. And if they still don't agree with it, you just tell them, well, you use what you want, but on your own risk, and I'm not going to be responsible for it. And they're going to have to sign off on it. And that's ultimately what you have to do. So that's your professional responsibility as a good translator. So